Morning, kiddos. Today we're going to talk about best practices with how to solder. Here's some of the things that you may need to solder. One, you need a soldering station or some type of soldering device. You may need to spend a little money to get a good one. Um, Especially if you're a person that's going to do a lot of soldering or electronic devices, so it'd be good. Or you could go to some lumber store or electronic store and you can purchase a regular handheld soldering iron. But for those that are going to do this in on a regular basis, it's good to spend a little money and get you a good soldering station. This has a hot air gun built into it. You can use this to heat shrink to cover up your splices or soldering. You can also use this to melt solder in certain circumstances when you're soldering. You can control the temperature of both the soldering, the hot iron, and the air as well. So it's a very good uh, piece of equipment and tool to use. I love this one. I used to use it when I used to work for Lockheed. We had similar devices like this, and I do a lot of soldering. So this is one of the equipment that I prefer. All right, but there's other types out there. You don't have to get this particular brand. On there, you also have the hot iron. This is the soldering iron. A lot of times when you're looking at it, you need to make sure it's not broken or damaged. Make sure this is tight, where the element is. Make sure the handle's okay because these irons get pretty hot. The cord's okay. Make sure you're screwed in and making good connection. You need solder, 60-40 with flux in the center would be a good solder that you need to solder electronic devices. You need a good pair of dikes, slant nose dikes, a small set. You need a decent needle nose, multi types of those. Solder sucker. This is a device that you push in, and when you're heating up solder, when it becomes liquid form and you get this close to it, you go like that, and it'll suck the excess solder off when you're trying to desolder something. This is used for desoldering. Also, solder wick is also used to desolder. What it does is it uses copper, braided copper, to put on there, and when you heat that up and heat the solder up, it usually wicks into the solder wick, right? So sometimes you can use this. I use this more because it's quicker and faster. And then when I'm cleaning up, I use that one, right? You need something to be able to hold what you're working on a lot of times. I like these little alligator clips. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of wiring soldering, it may be good to put some heat shrink on these ends, on the end of these, because if you get too close to it when you're soldering, and if you got insulation there, these will dig into it and mess up the insulation. But if you put some heat shrink on the ends of these, it'll protect it. A lot of times when I solder, I keep it far away from there, so it's not too close. And one of the tricks of soldering is get on and get off. Don't heat that up no more than you have to, and get away from it, because you can damage components. The longer you stay on a PC board or on wire or whatever, you can damage it. So the best process or best practice is to get on it and get off of it, okay? I like these types because they're adjustable and you can tighten them down or whatever. And it also has a little magnifying glass where you can look at your work. Also, it's good to have a mag light that it'll help you see what you're doing. Also, it has a magnifying glass inside it, just like this right here, so you can see what you're doing better, because a lot of times electronic devices are small, okay? But it also provides a good light, okay? So this morning I'm going to tin the tips of this solid core wire. A lot of times you would have braided wire and you would kind of twist it neatly together, and then you would tin it so it'd be like a solid core wire, be one piece of wire. So you can, matter of fact, I'll do one here as well. But I'm going to show you some of the best practices with the soldering iron, your setup and use of it. Okay, one, we don't need a hot air gun. We're not going to use it. We're only going to turn on the solder station. A good temperature for a solder station is about 700 degrees, and that's usually where I keep it. It'll take it a little bit to build up to it, okay? And another thing, you're going to need a sponge to clean your tips as you go, because you need to constantly keep that tip clean. You got to take care of the tip. If you don't take care of the tip, it won't do a very good soldering. It won't be a good and clean solder joints that you create, okay? A lot of times you see on YouTube videos, they don't talk about this, but when you put a little solder on it and then you touch it, you can get a crystallized joint, which is not a very good connection. You want a clean looking silver, a shiny looking connection when you solder something, component on a PC board or whatever. If it looks crystallized, that's not a good solder joint, and that's not a good practice. Sometimes it can interfere with the connection. It can actually cause heating at that point. So that is not a good practice. So right now I'm letting my hot iron heat up. Remember, 700 degrees is well above the temperature needed to do a 3rd-degree burn. So do not touch it. It's like iron. It's much harder than an iron, like when you iron clothes, and that's extremely hot. So just remember, this is a really hot iron. All right, the first thing I do is when I heat it up, I clean the tip, take some solder out, clean the tip. You see this little hole in the sponge? This is designed for that. And it should be shiny, all right? And then I tin it. You keep that tip tinted, even when not in use. You tin it and then you turn it off, because this coating over the tip protects it from oxidation. Right? We don't want oxidation on our tip because it's hard to clean off. We'll have to use a sandpaper and stuff or material to clean that off. But if you'll take care of that tip, it'll take care of what you're trying to do. Okay? So I'm going to get a piece of solid core wire, and what I'm going to do is every time I'll take it out and put some fresh solder on it. And you need to get a little bit of solder there to make a good heat connection on it. So I'm going to turn this around here. So I've got a good heat connection. I'm going to put the solder on there. And then once the heat gets to it, you'll see it start flowing. See, it's going now. Now I can go all day with it now because the copper is heated up. Matter of fact, also when you're soldering, and when you get done, put more solder back on it and stick it back in the station. Keep it there. And the best way to hold a soldering iron is like how you should hold a pencil. Some of you hold it weird like, but it actually should be held like a pencil when you're writing, right? So it's good to have an area or something underneath it, like a little pan, to protect the surface that you're working on. This right now has got a coating on here that really breaks off, and the solder flux actually keeps it from connecting, okay? And also remember, there's lead in here. Wash your hands after use, because you don't want lead to absorb into your skin. All right, so now I'm going to connect 2 pieces together, okay? But normally it's good to, before you do that, to tin the tips, tin the pieces before you put them together, because it's easier to control. So again, I clean the tip, put some fresh solder on it, and then I'm going to start heating that up. Put some solder on it so I can get a good joint connection, a good conduction to the copper. All right. Now you see it flowing. See, and it'll follow it. It'll follow the heat, and I can go all the way down. Right. Sometimes if you get too much solder on it, if you do like that, tap it, it'll knock some of it off. So when I'm done, I'll put some solder on it, protect the tip. Okay, and then I want to use my little joint thing here to line it up so I can tin them together. And remember, it's hot after you just solder it. Okay, and you need it to sit on it without having any push or resistance, because as soon as you heat this up, it may slip on you. All right, so clean the tip, put some solder on it, then I'll make a good conductivity, heat conduction, and then once you get it, it should start flowing. And I'll give me a good solid. But also remember, you want to get on and off, and don't get too close to the end of this to this, because if you do, that gets hot too. So when I'm done, I'll heat that up, put that back in there. All right. So let it cool down. Once it's cooled down, I can take it off, and I have one solid piece. And if you can see it right there, it's shiny. It doesn't look foggy or anything. That's a good solid connection. But if it looked crystallized like a dull, that means it moved a little bit while you were soldering and it crystallized, which can actually cause heat to take place there, which can cause a bad connection, right? Like I said earlier, I'm going to show you this with stranded wire. And one of the good things about this right here is I'm using the component that it's on to hold it. I can normally I would just have the wire off of it and then solder it that way. That's usually a good practice. Okay, so I'm gonna strip the wire back, and usually if you have a good set of strippers, that'd probably be a good thing to have too. All right, so this is stranded, not solid core. This is solid core. It's one piece of wire, which actually handles more current than a stranded wire. The same gauge stranded wire handles less current than a solid core. Okay, so again, we'll take our tip, clean it, put some fresh solder on it to protect that tip, and then put some solder on there and to make so I can get a good conduction on it. And then you'll start seeing it wick in just like if we were using solder wick. And then once it starts going in, you can make it go wherever you want it to go. I can go away from the wire, and I can go with the wire. All right? And if you'll notice, it's tinted. And one of the things you need to remember is to get on and get off. Always protect that tip, right? And if you can look at it, it's tinted. It's like one solid piece of wire. Even when I cut it off, it stays together. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's stranded. It's like a solid core piece of wire, right? If you can see that. And I always usually do, no matter what I'm going to do, connections, put spade connectors on, or fixing to put it in a lug type connection or something that we have to screw down on, because stranded wire doesn't do well in it, and it doesn't. You don't get the whole wire, but if you'll tin it together and then do that, it stays together. And so when you screw down on it, it's like screwing on a whole piece of wire. So and it also keeps the stranded pieces from breaking off, because every time a piece of stranded wire breaks off, the less current it can handle. All right, any questions? I hope there's any questions. You know how to email me. Remember, always take care of that tip, clean it up. Remember, that's hot. Make sure you wash your hands after you're done. Have some wipes handy that I usually have with me, and clean your hands, because remember, it's lead inside there, and we don't want no one to get any lead in their system. Okay. Hope this was informal. See you on the flip side.